This has Vikings fans fired up as a recent rankings article absolutely snubs several Vikings who were more than deserving of a spot. But first, we dive into how the Vikings are now the biggest NFL team in the world amidst record ticket sales. We're going to break down all that in this episode of Vikings Digest. But first, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss any and all Vikings updates as we head further and further into the summer. And with that, let's hop into the first topic of the day, which is that the Vikings are the biggest team in the world. So yesterday, tickets for the Vikings versus Steelers game in Dublin, Ireland went on sale, and the queue to even get a ticket was a long one, setting a record where Pat McAfee was reporting that there's different numbers that have been popping up. Obviously, whenever you check in, it was at 620,000. I think at one point somebody had it at 608,000. There was down at 500 and some thousand, a couple different points. Nonetheless, there's not a 700,000 seat stadium in Dublin, Ireland. So I do believe they sold that place out and could sell out another place and another one and another one. Shout out to the Iron Ireland fans being big time football. And this is huge for the Vikings, who are no strangers to playing overseas, as this is going to be one of two games that the Vikings play overseas and back-to-back games that they're going to be playing over in the UK, both of which against Aaron Rodgers, where we're going to be getting a rematch of the Vikings-Jets game, but this time in the form of Vikings and Steelers. But overall, this is huge, where it goes to show that people all over the world, they want to see the Vikings play. Yes, this is the first game in Ireland. You could make the argument that anybody would have been causing this much chaos or this much popularity around it. But because we have seen the Vikings consistently sell out these international games compared to in the past, when it's Jacksonville and Atlanta, nobody cares. When it's Jacksonville and Miami, nobody cares. When it's Cleveland Browns, nobody cares. When it's Minnesota Vikings, they care and they show up and they show out. And even when it's those other teams playing that aren't the Vikings overseas, you see a ton of purple in those stands where it's players, you see jerseys of all the different teams, but you see a predominantly amount of purple in those stands, and that is amazing to see. Whether it's a team like the Jags and the Falcons playing, or the Browns and the Titans, or whatever, it's awesome to see that a bunch of Vikings fans are over there in the UK, and we're sending a lot of love over to you guys from North America, from Canada, all over the world. It's going to be awesome to watch the Vikings this year. But this was a huge moment where it goes to show that not only is the NFL going to be very successful in Ireland, but it goes to show that this Vikings fan base just keeps getting bigger and bigger than even the most craziest of Vikings fans would have thought, where we have fans from all over the world stretching even further than we could have imagined, wanting to see this team win a Super Bowl. So this is pretty awesome news for the Vikings. I just wanted to throw it in here because just what a crazy buzz this game is generating, and just expanding the NFL and the game of American football to further international crowds is amazing for the sport. So definitely let us know what you guys have to say about that. But that's going to take us into our second topic of the day, which is the main topic, and that is that CBS Sports snubs the Vikings. So the other day, Prisco's NFL Top 100 Players of 2025 on CBS Sports was revealed. Saquon Barkley cracked the top 5 other running backs made the top 50, 4 quarterbacks in the top 10, but we don't care about any of that. We care about where the Vikings ended up, and of course, to no one's surprise, Justin Jefferson was in the top 5 as the highest ranked wide receiver on the list, saying that Jefferson continues to make a strong case as the best receiver in the league. Well, he is. He had 103 catches with 10 touchdowns last season, but had 28 catches of 20 yards or more that led the league. And last season, he was at number 7 on this list. So that's pretty amazing. We kind of knew Justin Jefferson was probably going to be on that list, and as well as the future NFL top 100 list that comes out, the NFL Network and NFL.com do, where it's the players actually voting on it instead of one biased journalist. But as far as the other Vikings that made the list, or Viking, I should say, is down a few more spots at number 59, and Christian Darrisaw, our offensive tackle, saying that Darrisaw was limited to 7 starts last season because of a torn ACL. When he was on the field, he was playing at a dominating level. He's one of the best pass blockers in the league. And yes, this is going to be something that is going to be a topic of discussion later on in this video and this topic. However, when looking at how Darrisaw was injured, he only had 7 starts, but in those 7 starts and throughout the rest of the season, he remained in PFF's top 10 of players at his position, and he didn't even play a half season, and he was still putting up those numbers, almost similar to what we saw with Aiden Hutchinson, who did make this list as well, where he had a very dominant first half of the season. He got hurt, unfortunately, missed the rest of the year, but even throughout the rest of the year, he was still in top 10 in all the defensive stats for a pass rusher or even just a defensive lineman, and he missed over half of the year, which is insane to see the production that he was on pace for. But as far as Christian Darrisaw, it goes to show the same case where even if a guy gets injured and misses a lot of games, if he's already proven that within the time that he was playing and it can consistently stay in there despite not playing with those numbers, that says something in itself. And now as far as some of the other injured players on the list, can't really say too much of the same for because of their production before they got injured or whatever in that case. But as far as players that did not make the list, yes, there was only 2 Vikings players that made the list this year. There was not a lot of other there was no other Vikings players, and yes, that means that there was no Andrew Van Ginkel on the sheet. AVG was pretty easily a top 100 player in the NFL last year. If you ask anybody, he stuffed the stat sheet for the Vikings, racking up 11.5 sacks, 18 TFLs, and 2 pick sixes. Van Ginkel rightfully earned second team All-Pro honors and finished 7th in defensive player during the Defensive Player of the Year voting, and he's one of the most versatile, productive defenders in the league. He should be in the top 50, arguably. Well, guess what? He didn't make the list, and his other linebacker mate, Jonathan Grenard, also didn't make the list, where he was a very good star edge rusher as well. He had 12 sacks, 18 TFLs, 4 forced fumbles, earning a few Defensive Player of the Year votes of his own, and per PFF, Grenard's 80 quarterback pressures in the regular season trailed only Myles Garrett, who was number 2 on the list, Trey Hendrickson, who was number 26 on the list, who had 83 each. If Danielle Hunter is number 47 on the list, how is Grenard unranked, especially when you look at their stats? And at first, I didn't want to believe this, but when you look at this stacked up overall, it is jarring to see that they had the same amount of games played. They had the same amount of the sacks as well. They had, Grenard had more solo tackles and more forced fumbles. Both of them made the Pro Bowl, but yet Danielle Hunter was the one making the list, and he made it at number 47, and yet Jonathan Grenard was nowhere to be found on this list. Absolutely insane, absolutely asinine if you ask me, if you ask anybody who's a football fan. And another player who was not on the list is Byron Murphy. This one isn't quite as egregious, but Murphy did have 6 interceptions, 14 total passes defended, 6 tackles for loss in a year in a Pro Bowl season, and has a real case to sneak onto the bottom end of a top 100 list on the real one that matters, which is the NFL Network and NFL.com's list that's voted on by the players, even if they acknowledge that those lists are hard to make. And there were so many other Vikings players that you could easily make a case for as to why they should have been on that list. Brian O'Neill, Jordan Addison, Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, Josh Metellus. There's so many other guys on the Vikings team that could have been considered for that spot, but they weren't. And when we look at the players that did make the list, yes, all these players that you're looking at right here, they made the list. I made this up here really quickly where you have the position, the team, and where they ranked on the list. And you see there where you have Sauce Gardner coming in at 24, and Byron Murphy wasn't even on the list. Tyreek Hill, who was an absolute liability in fantasy football if you had him. I was one of those guys who took him as my number 1 overall pick and with the number 2 overall in the first round, and it burned me absolutely. Christian McCaffrey, who was injured almost the entire season, somehow logged in at 41. Quinnen Williams, he had a solid year, but not a great one. He was at 48. Jalen Johnson, a quarter from Chicago, he had a solid season, but not a great one. He fell off. He was at 71. Jesse Bates fell off. He was at 73. Jair Alexander, who just today signed with the Baltimore Ravens, he was injured for most of the year, and he was 79. And when you look at these guys that were injured, Antoine Winfield, Dak Prescott, for God's sakes. Then you have Travis Kelce, who had one of the worst years of his career in the regular season, making the list. And when you look at the guys that were injured on this list, yes, I said that about Darrisaw. He was injured and he should have, and yes, he's rightfully on that list. But when these guys got injured, none of their stats held up under the rest of the year, where their stats carried through the rest of the year to continue to be a top 10 guy at their position. When these guys, none of these guys did, and Christian Darrisaw absolutely did. And when you look at these guys that made the list, where you have a guy like Jesse Bates, who's a really solid safety, but yet Cam Bynum didn't make that list, or Byron Murphy didn't make that list. And you look at the linebackers, Bobby Wagner, he's a good veteran, but the NFL isn't in the business of what have you done for me in the past, it's what have you done for me lately. And when you look at this list, Bobby Wagner, Antoine Winfield, who was also injured. Those guys really weren't playing at their full extent. Same with Jesse Bates. A lot of these guys that made the list were guys that had drop-offs from the year prior into last year, and yet they still made the list, where a bunch of Vikings players had career years getting Defensive Player of the Year nominations, and they didn't make the list. Sauce Gardner, the most overrated corner in the entire NFL, was at number 24 on a terrible Jets team, and yet Byron Murphy didn't make it at all. Absolutely asinine, absolutely insane. I don't know how CBS Sports, I don't know what they're smoking over there or what they're doing, but they are absolutely losing their minds, and hopefully this is something that is very different when it comes time for the real top 100 players list that we tend to go by as far as judging the greatness of players, and that is the one that NFL.com, NFL Network, and the NFL players vote on. So we shall see how many Vikings players really make the one that matters. But as far as this CBS Sports list, yes, there's some really solid names on the list, but as far as I'm concerned, you can toss it out the window. You can use it as toilet paper. You can do whatever you want with it. But when the NFL one comes out later this summer, that is the one that's really going to matter. But who's going to know how many guys we're going to see on that list? But that's a question I want to pose for you guys, is since we only had 2 guys make this list, yeah, Darrisaw and Jefferson, they're probably going to make the NFL list for the NFL.com one for sure. But which ones of the guys that we mentioned in this video do you think will be also on that list? Do you think Van Ginkel and Grenard will be on that list? Do you think it'll just be AVG? Do you think that Jordan Addison could also sneak onto that list? Maybe TJ Hawkinson? Let us know down in the comments below who you think could sneak onto the real NFL top 100 players. And what did you think about CBS Sports' list in this case? Let us know down in the comments below. But that's going to do it for this episode of Vikings Digest. I've been your host, Griffin. Take care.